Hello and welcome to my channel today, Boost, Nicks, and more. Today we are reading the story I'm writing called Reptile Ethics and Standards. So please like this video and subscribe to the channel, and for more videos like this, watch my other half's channel, A&A Snakes and Stuff, my youngest son's channel, Henny's Toys and Games, or my oldest son's channel, Little Christine. Let's dive into the video. Chapter 1, title, The Wired Type Podcast, Reptile Standards and Controversial Subjects. The microphone hummed as the Wiretype podcast began. The soft clicks of the intro music played, and then fell silent as the host, Elijah, leaned forward, his voice steady and warm, ready to dive into the controversial waters of reptile standards. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Wiretype podcast, where we take a deep dive into all things wired and wonderful in the world of reptiles. I'm your host, Elijah, and today we're tracking some big topics. Reptile keeping has grown exceptionally over the past decade, and with it the standards of care, breeding ethics, and the overall treatment of these fascinating creatures have become complicated. His voice fluttered for a moment, knowing how changed this subject could get. It never shied away from tough conversations, though. Today, we're addressing some of the most controversial subjects in the reptile world, from genetic mutations to the ethics of breeding specific traits to the push for more regulation and standards in the industry. Let's dive in. Across from Elijah sat his guest for the episode, Dr. Sylvia Lynn, a herpetologist and reptile conservation advocate. She adjusted her glasses, taking a moment before speaking, her tone calm yet resonant. Thank you for having me, Elijah. It's always a pleasure to discuss topics that are often swept under the rug. First, let's talk about genetic mutations in reptiles, something that's been a hot topic. Breeding for certain traits, whether it's a specific color morph in ball pythons or an unusual pattern in geckos, has become incredibly popular. But where do we draw the line between genetic modifications for beauty and the health of the animal? Elijah nodded, glancing at the notes in front of him. I think the crux of the issue comes down to ethics. Breeding animals for aesthetics, traits like albino or piebald morphs, can sometimes lead to health issues that are downplayed by breeders, Elijah said. We've all heard of the neurological issues in some morphs of corn snakes, or the deformities that have emerged in certain species of tortoises. But there's a huge market for these traits, and it's profitable. But there's a huge market for these traits, and it's profitable. Is it ethical to continue breeding these animals knowing the potential health risk involved? Dr. Lynn leaned forward, her eyes flashing with intensity. It's a tricky question. There are breeders who genuinely care about the animals and work within ethical guidelines, focusing on long-term health and genetic diversity. But unfortunately, there are also those who breed for profit without considering the long-term consequences. The responsibility should be on both breeders and consumers to ensure that we are not perpetuating genetic defects for the sake of a trend. The tension in the air was palpable. Elijah felt it, but he pressed on. What about the argument that these mutations are natural, that they're just part of the evolution process, and that breeding them is no different from natural selection? Dr. Lynn shook her head slightly. Natural mutations, yes, but the difference is the level of control humans have over the breeding process. When we intentionally breed for specific traits, we are speeding up evolution in a way that could be detrimental to the animal's overall well-being. It's not just about the mutation itself, it's about the unintentional consequences of pushing the species beyond its natural genetic diversity. The conversation shifted to another thorny topic: the growing cause for more regulation in the reptile trade. Elijah's voice grew more serious. Regulation is one of the most continuous subjects in the reptile community. On one hand, you have people advocating for stricter laws to protect wildlife and ensure proper care standards for captive reptiles. On the other hand, you have hobbyists and breeders arguing that it could stifle their ability to keep and breed reptiles responsibly. Dr. Lynn's expression softened. The concern for overregulation is valid, especially for small breeders and enthusiasts, but the reality is that many reptiles in captivity are not being kept in the most humane conditions. There's a difference between responsible care and taking advantage of a growing market. Proper regulation can ensure that reptiles are kept in environments that meet their physical and psychological needs, that they are bred responsibly, and that invasive species aren't introduced into ecosystems where they don't belong. Elijah paused for a moment. He could sense how passionate both sides were. The debate was fierce, but the conversation was necessary. Before we wrap up, Elijah said, let's talk about the future where do you see reptile keeping and breeding going in the next 10 to 20 years? Where these conversations resolve themselves, controversies resolve themselves, or are we on a collision course? Dr. Lynn exhaled slowly, her gaze thoughtful. Sadly, I think the divide will continue for some time. The reptile industry is still relatively young compared to other pet industries, and there's a lot of growing pains to be had. However, I do believe that more awareness will push for better standards and practices. The key is balancing personal freedom with ethical responsibility. Elijah smiled, nodding in agreement. I couldn't have said it better myself. Well, that's all for today's episode of the Wiretype Podcast. We've covered some tough topics, but it's important to keep having these conversations if you want to improve the future of reptile care and conservation. As the outro music played, Elijah leaned back in his chair, reflecting on the episode. The world of reptiles was complex, filled with controversy, but it was a word that needed to be discussed, analyzed, and understood. And as long as there were voices like his and Dr. Lynn's, the conversation would keep evolving, hopefully leading to a future where both reptiles and their keepers could thrive. Thank you for watching this video, and peace out till the next one.